Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and dogs, and freaks of nature of all ages. My name is Brian Bad Hippie Jackson, and welcome to my first work in progress, WIP, for my first person build of Treasures of the Dead. Now, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and pop this open a little bit wider so you can see it. I'm going to go select game mode so we can get rid of all those sprites and things like that. And if you're wondering what this pink thing around the base of the tree is, that is my trunk collider. I don't want detailed colliders on my trees. There are several areas on the map where the trees overhang these upper areas that you have to walk on, like over here and over, ooh, that got all dark, and over here. And if I had detailed colliders on the trees, then you would be stopped cold by hitting a leaf, and that is not cool. It also takes up way too many processes, so as part of the optimization and to make sure you can get where you need to go, I just placed a kind of a cylindrical collider around the trunk. It's just high enough that you can't jump over it, so you know the trees do have colliders. But let me go ahead and give you a history of the game, where it came from, all that kind of good stuff as we tool around and look at a few things. The original Treasures of the Dead was a top-down sprite-based shooter that I built several years ago in GameMaker 8.1 Lite. And I honestly did not want to do a top-down game when I built that. My intention when I got the engine, because it was free, was to build a first-person shooter. But GameMaker 8.1 Lite did not come with the capability of creating a first-person shooter, so I had to go with a top-down. Now, the reason I wanted to do the game in the first place, besides the fact that I've just always wanted to make a video game, is I wanted to pay tribute to some of the games that I always loved when I was younger, because I've been around video games since video games began. And I love video games. I love them, I love them, I love them. And I loved some of the old school games like Doom, Duke Nukem, Tomb Raider, those Resident Evil. Those were all game changers, pun intended, in the genre. They all changed the way we look at games, the way we game. They all had something very special to offer. And I wanted to harken back to those days in the 80s and the 90s when games were built like that. In fact, the original title for Treasures of the Dead was supposed to have been Doom Raider. I know, stupid, but that's what I was going to call it. So anyways, when I realized that I couldn't do the first-person shooter that I wanted to do, I said, you know what, I'm going to have to find another way to do this, and I love Gauntlet, so yeah, let's do a top-down, because I can pay tribute to Gauntlet as well with the top-down, so I did that. And then when I started doing my Treasures of the Dead reboot in UDK, I started it as a top-down shooter because the original Treasures of the Dead was a top-down shooter. But then I said, you know what? No. I never really wanted to do that top-down thing in the first place. I only did that to begin with because of the limited capabilities I had with the engine that I was using. It was the first engine I had ever tried. It was the first game I had ever built. And it actually was received very well when I released it on Yo-Yo Games. I got a lot of good comments on it. It had an average score of 3.5 out of 5 stars, so I was very proud of what I did. It came out very, very well, I thought. But so when I started doing this in UDK, I started it as a first-person or a top-down shooter because that's what the original was, and then I said, no, I'm going to do it as a first-person because that's what I wanted to do to begin with. That was the original idea, and I want to stick with that original concept. I want to be able to do in this what I wanted to do before but couldn't quite pull off. So that's why we're going with a first person. That and the fact that I don't have to rewrite the goddamn shoot code to accommodate a top-down. Yay! Anyways, so with that said, there's quite a few things in this build that I'm really liking, and you know, I decided on UDK because I love the Unreal Engine. I was thinking about using UE4, but quite honestly, there's a couple of reasons I decided against it. One, I can run UE4 on my computer, and I can build in UE4, but to be able to test play, I have to drop my graphics settings because my computer is not the greatest thing in the world. I mean, it does great for a lot of stuff, but it just doesn't quite have the oomph to give me what I want in UE4, although I could build the game. I decided I wanted to use UDK for this for one reason. It's just I don't have to reduce any settings. I can run the game pretty much at full resolution, blah, 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 and it runs just fine. And there's the fact that I want as many people as possible to be able to play the game. I'm really not interested in keeping up with the newest technology, the newest this, the newest that. As you can see by my graphic style, and I'll get into these textures later, I have some fairly simplistic, although very good looking textures, I might add. I am really proud of my materials and the way they're coming out. I put a lot of work and a lot of effort into them. I still need to retexture my portal key, which is a U damage pickup that was bundled with UDK. That's going to be a challenge because if I hit real time, we'll see that that has an animated texture and a transparency, and I want to maintain that. So being able to retexture that to maintain that animated texture and that animated transparency, or that transparency, is going to be a challenge. I also did not retexture the smoke. I didn't retexture the portals or the vortex because it made them look stupid. And I'll go with the original texture on that in order to prevent stupidity or unintentional stupidity. My health plants, this is one of my health plants. This is my shout out to Resident Evil from their health herbs. There are three colors. Red or green will give you back 25 points, red will give you back 50 points, and gold will give you back full health. There are 6 health pickups in this first level, 4 red and 2 gold. All of the health does respawn. Okay, so let's get back out into this other area where there's a bit more light, and I will go over some of the things that I'm doing with these materials and these textures. So I already told you that I decided to build in UDK. The biggest reason is so that it can be playable by more people. So that I want it to be playable by as many people as possible. So that's why I'm doing UDK. That's why I intentionally dropped the build from DirectX 11 to DirectX 9. So that if you have an older machine with an older processor or you don't have the greatest video card, you will still be able to play the game. Another thing I'm doing is, if we get back over here just a little bit, you'll see that even from a short distance, these textures, these materials look almost realistic. They have depth, they have some pop, they have, I'm using normal maps and specularity. They look really good, but when you get up close, what we're looking at is something that looks very much like hand-painted watercolor, water wash. And what I call these materials or these textures is my wet wash effect. And I have retextured everything except, as I said, the fire smoke, the portals, and the vortex, which are right over here. The fire smoke, the portal, and the vortex I'm going to leave at the base texture because I don't want them to look stupid. But everything else has that wet wash effect. This little guy right here is part of my achievement system. I do plan on putting in an achievement system. This monk came bundled with UDK, and I completely resized and retextured him. There will be 15 levels in the game, 10 collectible statues per level. So if you get all 10 monks on a level, you will get an achievement. If you get all 50 in the game, you will get an achievement. And I have created yellow, red, blue, and green textures. So depending upon what part of the game you're in will depend on what color the statue is, to add a little bit of variety to that. This is one of the gold health pickups. That'll give you back full health. And then if I jump into, oops, I selected something, select none. If I jump into my content browser here and I go down to my stuff, I'm going to fully load this material package. And if I look at my textures, this is the block wall that's right there that we just showed you. So let's zoom in on that block wall a little bit, move this over a tad, probably getting some ghosting on there. And as you can see right there, that looks pretty good, but I'm using very low poly models when I can. From the side, you'll see that is an absolute flat surface, but I was able to work the texture with just a couple of texture samples and no material functions to look pretty good. Same with these rocks. From a distance, they look really good. You get up close, they still look good, but they definitely have that hand-painted watercolor, water wash, wet wash type of effect to them. So if I open up this block texture, that is my texture. Now this texture came bundled with UDK. I took the texture, moved it into GIMP, and through a process that I am keeping secret, I got that effect that I wanted. I did the same thing with everything else. This is the stone. It's a castle rock that came bundled with UDK. This is what I'm using on my landscape. The other textures I'm using in my landscape are Nobiax textures. This dirt there, this dirt rock there, and this grass rock there are the Nobiax textures that I'm using on my landscape. I'm also using some Nobiax meshes. The health pickups are Nobiax meshes, but I'm being very selective about the third-party content I use. I don't want to fall into that trap that a lot of indie developers fall into, where they just grab whatever third-party content they can, they throw it into the game completely unaltered for the sake of churning out a game as fast as they can in the hopes of making a quick buck. Fuck that noise. I do not want to do that. This game, I want it to be as good as I can possibly make it. I want people to enjoy playing the game. I want people to have fun. I want it to be a good game. I want all of my objects, all of my models, all of my materials and textures to have a very consistent yet unique look. And I don't think I have ever seen this kind of texturing in a game anywhere. I mean, you see comic book type textures all the time. That's not uncommon. You see cell shading textures all the time. That's not uncommon. But this kind of hand-painted watercolor wet wash effect, I don't think I've ever seen that, and so I think that gives the game a very good, unique look. It kind of brands it as being all mine. So yes, I'm going to be very, very selective as to what third-party content I use and how it's placed, how it's textured. I want the game to be as good as possible, so I'm not shortcutting on that kind of shit. The reason I'm using third-party content, primarily bundled with UDK, Nobiax meshes and textures, and you can find Nobiax on DeviantArt. Just search Nobiax. He has a lot of really good royalty-free stuff. And some stuff off of Google SketchUp, very selective about what I'm using, is because if I had to make every model and every texture and every material from scratch, it would take me between 5 to 10 years to build the game. And even though I'm not really worried about doing it as fast as I can, I don't want to take too long either. So I do have to expedite the process here and there. Okay, so now if I go into the materials, we saw what textures we used to get started with. We can look at stuff like this dirt on the landscape. And we pull back, we see, if you look at that upper corner, you can see some shine there. That's the specularity. So we've got some good depth to it. The rocks kind of pop out. They look like they stand out from the dirt. They shadow depending upon the lighting direction. And I'm only using 2 texture samples, a diffuse map and a normal map. And then I've got the green from the RGBA in the diffuse sample. I've got the green running into my specular instead of creating a separate specular map, and I have no material functions on these. The reason I'm using these for specular is because you can, and by reducing my texture samples, it's going to optimize it a little bit better, and it's going to make it playable by more people. So by reducing my texture samples and reducing the number of material functions I have, I can make it playable by a lot more people who want to play the game. Now for running these color channels into your specular to give that shiny, the green gives the least amount of shiny, then red, then blue, then white, which is the alpha channel. The alpha channel is what I would run into the specular if I wanted to do something like wet concrete or wet asphalt. if we pop open this stone block up here, which is right there, we can see that it's got good depth. The blocks stand out. The blocks look like they're popping out. The mortar looks like it is sunk in. And I set that up the same way. The greatest majority of my textures are only running 2 texture samples, a diffuse map, a normal map, and then have either the green or the blue plugged into the specular depending upon the amount of shiny that I want on it. Now, you might be saying, hey, I saw some lighting issues in this, like for instance the tree shadows. If we look at these tree shadows, they're kind of blobby, and when we get into the indoor maps, you'll see a couple of what appears to be glitches with some of the objects in there, the interpolation actors. Those aren't really glitches. What we got going on here is, if we go up to this little light bulb with the eyeball, that's our lighting quality for the build right now. There are 4 levels of lighting quality: preview, medium, high, and production. And as I build, I always build with preview lighting. And that is why we have blobby shadows on the trees, and we have what appear to be glitches, shadow glitches, coming off of interpolation actors in the indoor levels, is because this is built with preview lighting, the lowest level of lighting there is. Once I burn the full game out into production lighting, these tree shadows will be very good. They will be detailed shadows, and all the other texture glitches will go away. But this is just because when I build with preview quality lighting. But that's one reason I love UDK so much. Now, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and call that good on the first episode of Treasures of the Dead, first person build WIP. And please do not forget to check the links in the description below for the Disabled American Veterans and the Wounded Warriors Project. Let's please help support our veterans. If you liked the video, then hit the like button, subscribe, and share. Tell your friends and family to hit the like button, subscribe, and share. Please don't forget to leave a comment. They are always welcome, good, bad, or somewhere in between. Thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate every one of you. You guys rock. And until next time, this is Brian Bad Hippie Jackson saying peace, love, clean underwear, and happy gaming.